believe it or not, I have a mother. No one's surprised by that? I mean, some folks, they just don't know. My mom was a huge part of my life, and that's a picture of my mom. That's Mrs. Linda Medcalf right there. My mom raised me as a single mom from the 6th grade forward. My parents got divorced in the 6th grade, and she is just simply incredible, was incredible. She loved me, she fought for me, she showed up over and over and over and over again. During that season in my life, from the 6th grade kind of onward, you can go back to the first one there, Anita. Just leave it there for a second. My mom was also at that time working. She was a single working full-time mom, and she was working an incredibly dynamic and stressful job. She was the House Democratic Campaign Caucus Committee Chair. It took me 2 years to learn how to say that. Which meant that she was in charge of running all the Democratic campaigns for the state of Washington. It was her job to make sure that the House Democrats were in kind of majority in Washington state. That was her job. So she was traveling all over Washington, recruiting campaign managers and candidates and interviewing folks and helping with all that. And somehow, some way, in the middle of that, she found time to be at almost every single one of my athletic games. My baseball games, my football games, my basketball games. Almost always, Linda Medcalf was in the crowd. She had what she affectionately called permanent bleacher butt. She complained incessantly about wood bleachers. Why not just put cushions on these? Why not? She was there all the time. If she had to leave early in the morning, she would make meals with little sticky notes on it. Jake, microwave this for 3.5 minutes. Not 4, not 3, 3.5. It's important. She would do that before she left because she knew she wouldn't be home for dinner. And I never thought about it till today after the first sermon this morning at the sunrise service. Having watched my kids now in baseball and in basketball and soccer, you realize how often that's a couple experience, that mom and dad are both there. And my mom, in all those games, would sit by herself because she was a divorced single mom and never felt like she was really part of the system. And she fought through that over and over again. My mom was also a brilliant and amazing cook. She loved to cook. That was one of her things. We threw giant Christmas parties. We threw giant Easter parties, though at that point of her life, kind of faith, we'll talk about in a second for her and how that journey went. But she would have this 15-pound roast that would be happening at my house and a crab Caesar salad that would be happening at my house. She loved good food. She loved good wine. She loved to serve people. I'm talking the average size at my Christmas Eve table was about 25. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but that she loved. During the Christmas season, once Thanksgiving ended, the very next day was like a baking blitz in our house. My mom had these 3 kind of crystal things that had 3 layers, a big bottom layer, then a middle layer, then kind of a smaller layer on top like that. She had 3 of those that for the entire Christmas season were never empty of some kind of cookie, fudge, candy, something she had baked. You're all like, yes, you know what I'm talking about. So you guys know what I'm talking about. I had a lot of high school friends who would come over simply for that table. Jake, can I come over to your house? Why? Hang out with you, and did your mom make cookies? Sure, come over for the cookies. And she'd come over for the cookies. My mom was intense in so many different ways. For years and years, I outgrew my mom. You can go to the next picture there, I think, Ronita, if you could. That's my mom in the hat there. That's me in the white hat. That's Joan facing backwards, in case you were wondering what Joan looks like from the back. That's her. She was that size. She's standing on her toes in that picture because she knew that somebody was taking it. She was actually shorter than that. So every time I got in trouble from the 6th grade on, which was like twice. Twice a day. I heard that. Who was that over here? She would grab me by the ear and say, come here. And she would put me on the bottom step so she could yell down at me. Because she got tired of doing this. She said, wait a minute, come here. And she was amazing. I miss her even more now than ever. I don't know if maybe some of you guys have lost a loved one, lost a mom, lost a brother, lost a sister, lost a son. I can't take my mom's cell phone number out of my phone yet. It's still in there, 360-471-4520. I used to call my mom on nights when it was super hard, like there's a long meeting, something's not going well, I'm driving home from wherever I'm driving home from here to my house. So many times in these last few years I wanted to call my mom. Because there's just some times that we need somebody on our side. I just needed a fan. Like someone to say, like, Jake, you can do it. You're a mate. She was always that for me, full of wisdom and just go-for-itness. I really miss that. She was an incredible leader in what she did. I remember exactly where I was when I got the first phone call from her friend, which is unusual. Like, my mom's friends don't usually call me. So when I'm walking home from Fuller Theological Seminary and I get a phone call from one of my mom's friends, I'm surprised. And so I answer the phone, and she says, Jake, where are you? I said, I'm in Pasadena. She goes, are you able to sit down? I said, yes. So I sat on a bench along the way, and she told me that my mom has stage 4 breast cancer and just didn't have the ability to call me right then and tell me. So her friend did. We went through that next period of time. My mom had a double mastectomy. We struggled through it. We prayed through it. We got our way through it, and we felt like it was in recovery, like the cancer was in recovery. And the cancer kind of drugs you take at the end of surgery that beat back cancer are not friendly drugs. It kept my mom so she couldn't taste the same. She couldn't taste the food she was cooking the same. She couldn't taste wine the same. She couldn't do the things she was normally doing. For most of my growing up career, my mom was intent on making sure that I was cultured. I think she still thinks it's her greatest failing. But every year, she would take me to Ashland for the Shakespeare Festival. I felt kidnapped most of those years. Mom, really? Right? She couldn't go to Ashland anymore. So this moment came when she went to the doctor, and the doctor gave her an MRI, and she was clear of what the doctor thought cancer was gone. And so they took her off the cancer meds. And so for 3 or 4 years, there's this gap in there that we really saw my mom again. And then she felt a lump underneath her armpit and was concerned about it about 4 years after that, and went back in, and they did another MRI, and they let her know that the cancer had metastasized to her bones, and there was nothing they can do. And so in the next period of time, we did the best we could to manage my mom's pain and her quality of life and all those pieces along the way. Along the way, there was many powerful conversations that happened about faith. My mom didn't grow up. In fact, she got kicked out of the church twice. The first time they came to my grandparents, she grew up in a little small town called Hoquiam, Washington. They went to the local Baptist church there. And so my mom was asking too many questions. Why about this? Why do we do it that way? Why do we do it this way? And so they came to my grandparents and said, like, we would like it if Linda would no longer attend Sunday school. So my grandparents were like, then we won't be coming here. And they tried again because it's kind of small town life, so many years ago. And so my mom later did a couple of things, got her kicked out of the church again. One of which was she protested that at that time at Hoquiam High School, women were not allowed to take math. My mom wanted to go to college. And she was like, wait a minute. I can't go to college without math. I don't need to know how to make a pillow in home ec. I need math. So she protested. She won. And the church said, we don't really want your family here, causing all this ruckus. The last one was, and I don't know if I can pull it off. I haven't tried in a long time. My mom tells this hilarious story of when the last time she got kicked out of the church, or just they told her to not be around, is they still had manners class, like when she was going to high school for women. And the rule is you had to balance a book on your head. Does anybody have to do this? You had to balance a book on your head, and walk with proper form back straight, like around the cone and back. And so my mom, just to spite everybody, did this. And like practice so she could make it all the way around. She also spent years and years, fighting for pro-choice. My mom led the entire pro-choice initiative for Washington State when that was on the ballot. And so her experience with faith people was limited, but her experience in that role was that it was people who were faithful in the church who would slash her tires, who would try to run her off the road, who would write in pig's blood baby killer on her Isuzu Trooper. So when her son became a Christian, it caused issues in the family. She asked for a lot of years, Jake, why can you not just work for the YMCA? That's Christian. There was a night when my mom used to watch The Daily Show at night, 11 o'clock at night on Comedy Central. This is going to date me, back when like Jon Stewart did it. And one night, Jim Wallace, who's a pastor and kind of started the Sojourners magazine and was doing some pretty amazing work, Jim Wallace was on. And she called me in tears at 11:30 that night. This is kind of the last phase where we were fighting cancer the last time. And she called me. She said, Jake, are you a Jim Wallace kind of Christian? I said, Mom, I've been trying to tell you that for like 20 years. Because I like him. He cares about the poor. He cares about equity. He cares about race. He cares about Jesus. And he's not a jerk. I said, I think I can become a Christian like that, Jake. I said, Mom, I think you can too. I remember one of our last moments, she was getting so weak that she couldn't really travel or drive, but she wanted to take me to the airport. So we stayed in a hotel near the airport. I remember being with her in that space, and she was lying down and just trying to breathe and make it. And I remember sitting down with her and planning her memorial, which is hard to do with your own mom, but then talking about the other side. And, Mom, you can't taste the food you love. You can't hold your grandkids. Maybe it's time to let go. I still think to this day, it's unknown. Maybe one day I'll know. I think Joan was 6 months pregnant at that time. So I think she was trying to hold on to meet Sammy. But she didn't make it. So we went to back Westport about a month later, and she was in Westport, Washington, and it's a small town, and so we were all flying in, and I remember being in her house. She had built this kind of dream house of hers, and her husband were doing food for the poor in Westport by using their land to farm. And the hospice nurses were there, and they said, look, here's how this is going to go down. Your mom, little by little, she was a frail piece of who she was. She didn't look like these pictures anymore, and she was half the weight and couldn't talk and hadn't eaten or drank in a while. And there's going to be this kind of death rattle breathing thing that happens, and just hold on. And so my brother and I were there, and we were holding her hands. We were all there, and everybody's crying. And I remember watching her react to Sammy a little bit and then take her last breath. I remember calling the ambulance. I remember them coming. I remember them picking up my mom's body. She had a hospital bed at the house, and putting her on a gurney and zipping up the black bag. I remember after that going and just falling in a weepy pile in the house we were staying at. I imagine it wasn't much different for the disciples. If you're wondering where the story was going, we found it. I imagine it wasn't much different for the disciples who had spent this 3-year period of time with Jesus. It was their friend. They had hundreds and thousands of meals together, and they've seen him heal and love and serve and be up all night healing people who needed it and who just needed some space. He had poured his life into them. He had loved them and healed their mothers-in-law and done all this. So they had been together, all the laughter, all the fireside jokes, all the fireside songs, the Passover meals, the sharing of things, all of this. And then just like Mary watched Jesus die. The disciples watched Jesus die. And they took his body, which must have been disfigured. They could barely maybe recognize him, not unlike with me and my mom. And they put him in a cold, dark tomb. It wasn't a black zipped-up bag, just a cold, dark tomb. And I think they must have done what my family done. I imagine that they kind of went back to the upper room. They were trying to figure out. They spent their whole life focused on this guy. They spent their whole existence on this guy. They left behind businesses. They left behind family. They thought this was the one, and now it's not the one. And now they got to figure out how to get out of town without getting caught and crucified themselves. And so they're in this pile trying to figure out grief and loss and sorrow and all those pieces together. And while they're in this space, it was like a 24-hour to 48-hour kind of just grief place. God, I know what that's like. Maybe you do too from the loss you've experienced. And the sun rose on Easter Day. Very early on Easter, the sun rose. And the women, I don't know what they were completely kind of imagining or thinking, like they had known that there was a big giant rock that went in front of the tomb, and it all kind of got locked up, and then Pilate put his signature on it, and there were some Roman guards on it, and they said, we're going to go out, and we're going to go visit it anyway. I could imagine it, like, imagine if Joan, my wife, and Nicole, my brother's wife, had said at this moment, we just want to go say goodbye to your mom one more time. Just one more time. We know where she is. Just one more time, we're going to go. I think that women felt the same way, and so they got up and they went, and they kind of went out with all their stuff to kind of see what they could do to anoint the body and engage their own grief process, and they got out there, and there was no stone. There was no stone. It got rolled away, and the thing was open, and now, wait a minute. I don't think they were thinking, oh, Jesus rose from the dead. I think they were thinking, who took Jesus? The same way that my wife and Nicole would have said, who took Linda? Where's Linda? And in the middle of that, there's these angelic figures, and who knows how Luke is telling the story, but they show up in multiple stories, and they say, sisters, why are you looking for the living among the dead? And confused and bewildered, these first evangelical women, the women who God entrusted with the story, they go back to the disciples and the people in the upper room who are in the process of grief and trying to figure out what to do next. And they say, he's not there. And then these two figures told us that he's alive. And the passage in Luke will tell you that they said, that's nonsense. As my brother and I would have done too. He said, what? We watched my mom take her last breath. They saw Jesus die with the holes in his hands and the cut in his side. They watched him drown in his own lungs. There's no way. Peter was the only one, according to the passage in Luke, who ran out there. And he had the same experience. The passage that I want to share with you comes after that, as they were gathering back up. It's this one. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, if you don't think God has a sense of humor, this is a good one. Jesus said to them, hello, how are you, everyone? Jesus said to them, peace be with you, shalom. Jesus stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. They were startled and frightened, thinking that they had saw a ghost. I mean, I could only imagine what would have happened if in that room in Westport on that dark and stormy night, if my mom, after watching her die, and after watching the bag get zipped up, and after watching her go away in the ambulance, as my brother and I are trying to figure out what do we do next and how do we take care of things in between tears and laughter and stories, these disciples in the upper room, all of a sudden my mom walks back into the room. I would have been this mix of like joyful, what is happening right now? Tears, laughter, hugs, not sure what's happening right now. That's the way the disciples would have felt. Maybe you would have felt that same way too. He said to them, why are you troubled? You're here. And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands. Look at my feet. It's me. It's not a ghost. It's not a spirit. It's not an idea. It's not a philosophy. It's not a good teacher. It's Jesus, God with skin on the Messiah, with the hole still in his hand. It's a body. It's a real thing. The resurrection is real. The body was real. It entered history in that. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have, as you're kind of hanging on me and hugging on me. I can imagine this kind of moment where Peter gives him a big giant hug, then looks back again. This is for reals? Let me see those hands. What's happening right now? All of that stuff. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. They still did not believe it. Because of joy and amazement, he asked them, I don't know if you guys ever read this. He asked them, y'all have anything to eat? This whole defeating death thing has made me hungry. Right? I need something to eat. He showed them his hands and his feet. He said, do you have something here to eat? And they gave him a piece of fish. Luke adds it just to show that the body was real. That the resurrection is real. That God entered history and it's real. Pastor Jake, how do you know it's real? I know it's real because those people in the room who saw Jesus, they were ready to run. They were ready to bail. They were ready to go. They were trying to figure out how to get out of town, how to go back to being fishermen. And once they saw a resurrected Jesus, everything clicked. It was like the puzzle piece they were waiting for, and now it fit. They reflected back on the reality that Jesus had told them that this was going to happen. That Jesus had told them over and over again that he was the Son of God, that he was God's chosen, that he was the Messiah. They reflected back on all the promises he made. They reflected back on when he raised Lazarus from the dead and said to Mary and Martha, do you believe in me? Because if you do, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you believe in me, you will never die. And that must have clicked for them in that moment as they thought about all the times, hey, I'm going to a place, I'm preparing a room for you. In my Father's house, there's many rooms. You will be with me and I will be with you. Or maybe they heard him talk to the criminal on the other side and said, today, brother, you will be with me in paradise. Those doors are open. And then a resurrected Jesus comes into the room and it was the last piece of the puzzle. And all of a sudden they got it. And you could watch almost in that space their fear fly away. Every single one of those disciples, instead of running, ends up making a choice. And they ask them throughout the course of history, they asked those 12 disciples, they said, will you deny that the resurrection took place? Will you deny that Jesus is Lord? Will you deny that Jesus is God? Will you deny that Jesus is the Messiah? And I imagine them looking at all of those moments, knowing that to say yes, they could live, but to say no, they will die. They were in that room when that body came in, and they couldn't deny it. Each one of them, John got exiled and finished his life on Patmos, but the other 11, they all died instead of denying that moment because they knew that the resurrection was real. The resurrection was real. The body was in the space and in the room and was eating broiled fish. The resurrection is a reality. The promise of Jesus, a reality. What an incredible gift. I mean, just what an incredible gift. Jesus was the first and not the last. What does that mean to us? What does that mean to us today? What does that mean to you, and what does that mean to me? I'll finish with those three things. You know what this means for us as a people? The gift that Jesus has brought to us, that God has brought to us is this, is that grief, loss, sorrow, brokenness, the darkness of the tomb, the darkness of the cross, they are not permanent. Resurrection is the reality. They are not permanent. At the pain we see every day, the systemic injustice, the oppression, the poverty, the kids sleeping on floors, the neighborhoods that are thrashed, the racial dividing lines that we experience, the bombings that happen in Sri Lanka, the reality of poverty that cripples so many, the abuse, the selfishness, the greed, all that we experience, the darkness that we experience, it is not permanent. It's temporary. That's what it means for us as a people, as a community. What does it mean for you? So many of us in this room are struggling through major issues right now. Our marriages feel like they're barely hanging on just by a thread. Our daughters and our sons, they're struggling through mental illness places. Our families are struggling. We're struggling. We have health issues. We can't see the way we used to. We can't walk the way we used to. We might have stage 4 breast cancer like my mom did. You know what it means for you? It means that none of that is permanent. That the darkness you experience will not last. That your son or daughter who's experiencing just some awful health issues, mental health issues potentially, or physical health issues potentially, that's not the permanent. That one day, all of us will have a new body. That Jesus was the first, but not the last. He defeated death and darkness for us all. You know what it means to me? Here's what it means to me, if I can. I want to go back to a picture of my mom, if we can, Anita. Here's what this means for me. One day, I'm going to see my mom again. One day I'm going to give her that famous side hug that someone got a picture of. One day, she has a new body. It's not racked by cancer. That walks again and bikes again and runs again and enjoys the beach again. That one day I'm going to taste her roast over and over again for the rest of eternity. And it's going to be even better than it was here. That her baking and her cookies and her house will smell even better than it used to. That we'll laugh and we'll play. That's what Resurrection Sunday means to me, and that's what I'm celebrating with my family, that one day my mom will get to meet my kids. She'll meet Sammy. She's going to love Daisy. She'll meet Chemo. And they'll hug and they'll play and they'll run. And we'll do it all in the presence of Jesus. On Resurrection Holy Sunday, that's what we celebrate. I want to finish with this. You know what this does for me? When I stop and I reflect on that reality, I feel courage. I feel fear begin to fade away. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of not getting it right, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of what others think. Because all of it's temporary. The truth is that Jesus was raised from the dead with a body. And so will I. And so will you. And so does my mom. There are some days, and maybe you have the same, when I just need the strength to keep moving forward. Anybody else? I just need the strength to keep fighting because it seems like the darkness is overwhelming. It's not. The darkness will not last. It won't. On this Easter Sunday, I hope and pray that the reality of the resurrection of a bodily Jesus sinks deep into your soul. And you know that grief, loss, sorrow, and brokenness, and maybe your life here in this time, is literally filled with nothing but tears. I want you to know that it's not permanent. That Jesus died for you too, and rose again for you too. He was dead and is now alive. The resurrection is real. Jesus was raised from the dead. It's not an idea or a ghost or a spirit or a good idea. He was bodily raised from the dead in real life by a God who loves you. For all who believe will never die. I will see my mom again. You will see your loved ones again. And they will be beautiful and perfect in the way that God made them to be. In their bodies, healed. Because the darkness does not last, because the resurrection is real. brothers and sisters, family, I'm praying simply that you would live every second of every day holding that truth deep in your soul. That Jesus was raised from the dead, defeated death, and lives. That you will too. Amen.